The K'tharr Hegemony had encountered resistance before. Primitive worlds, nascent civilizations clinging to their planetary shells, occasionally even a nascent, spacefaring culture that dared to raise an unshielded vessel against the might of the Grand Fleet. But never before had they faced a problem that required the deployment of the Obsidian Phalanx. The Phalanx was not merely an elite fighting force. They were an existential response. Each warrior, a culmination of millennia of genetic refinement and psionic conditioning, was a living weapon, a spearhead forged in the heart of a dying star. Their very presence on a battlefield was a declaration of absolute, uncompromising dominion. Their target, a small, verdant sphere, the third world of the Sol system. Designate Terra. Its inhabitants, a chaotic, self-destructive species, were deemed a low-priority threat, ripe for assimilation into the hegemony's vast resource matrix. Routine. That was the consensus among the Strategos Prime. A standard pacification, followed by resource extraction protocols. The Obsidian Phalanx was an exercise in overkill, a psychological flex for any lingering rebel cells across the sector. A swift, decisive demonstration of K'tharr might. From the silent, obsidian void of the high orbit, the colossal battle carrier harbinger of dominion deployed its complement. Not with the thunderous roar of atmospheric reentry, but with the chilling whisper of grav drives disengaging. The dropship's sleek, predatory darts of neutron-dense alloy slipped through the upper thermosphere like shadows across a dream. Each carried a single squad of the Phalanx, encased in adaptive chameleonic armor that shifted seamlessly from the cold vacuum black to the deep blues of the sky, then to the mottled greens and browns of the planetary surface. Their objective was simple: secure key infrastructure nodes, neutralize resistance, and establish a beachhead for the follow-on assimilation units. A surgical strike. Clean. Efficient. Expected. The lead dropship, designation Serpent's Tooth, sliced through the humid equatorial air, its cloaking field shimmering, barely visible. Within its cramped confines, 8 figures stood sentinel, their biomonitors displaying calm, rhythmic vital signs. Their leader, designated Phalanx Alpha 7, surveyed the descending topography on his internal visor display. Forests, mountains, the glint of distant, sprawling settlements. He accessed the tactical overlay, civilian population clusters, military installations, energy grids. All cataloged, all prioritized for pacification. The strategic analysis had been exhaustive. Terra was a Class 3 pre-FTL civilization, technologically primitive, lacking coordinated orbital defenses or effective energy shielding. A soft target, a formality. The Serpent's Tooth touched down with barely a tremor, its landing struts sinking silently into the soft, loamy soil of a dense, primeval forest. The ramp hissed open, revealing a wall of thick, verdant foliage, alive with the alien sounds of native fauna. No resistance, no warning, just the symphony of an untouched world. The Phalanx moved with the practiced grace of predators, their heavy boots compressing the damp earth, leaving no discernible trace. Their neural net connectivity, a seamless web of synchronized thought and action, reported clear channels, no jamming, no hostile energy signatures. The initial phase was proceeding exactly as predicted. Other dropships followed, dispersing their lethal cargo across the designated zones: desolate plains, remote mountain ranges, coastal regions far from populated areas. The strategy was to establish multiple, isolated insertion points, then converge, minimizing collateral damage to infrastructure and maximizing the psychological impact of their sudden, inexplicable appearance. Each Phalanx squad, a self-sufficient unit of destruction, began its methodical sweep. Reports flowed back to the Harbinger of Dominion with chilling regularity. Zone Alpha secured. No hostiles encountered. Zone Beta clear. Proceeding to Target 2. Zone Gamma reporting initial pacification of indigenous fauna. The cold, mechanical efficiency of the K'tharr war machine was undeniable. Hours bled into the Terran cycle. The sun, a yellow dwarf, began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet. The Harbinger remained in geosynchronous orbit, its vast sensor arrays sweeping the planet below, confirming the flawless execution of the initial phase. No energy spikes, no widespread panic, no desperate last stands. The indigenous life forms were simply unaware of the silent, unseen blades that had already begun to slice through the fabric of their world. A deep, almost smug satisfaction settled over the Strategos Prime aboard the battle carrier. Another world brought into the hegemony's fold. Another testament to K'tharr superiority. Then a flicker, a minute, almost imperceptible blip on the deep scan telemetry. From Zone Delta, where Phalanx Alpha 4 was operating, a single, anomalous energy signature. Not hostile, not even definable, just unrecognized. The Strategos Prime dismissed it, likely a localized atmospheric disturbance, or perhaps a unique geological emission. Terra was a geologically active world, nothing of concern. The Phalanx was designed to operate in any environment, against any threat. They were the ultimate weapon. They were inviolable. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the world below plunged into the profound darkness of night. The Harbinger of Dominion continued its silent vigil, but the flow of routine, confident reports from the Obsidian Phalanx had begun to slow. First, the detailed tactical updates became sparser. Then, the rhythmic, all-clear pings stretched longer between transmissions. No alarm, no distress signal, just a gradual, creeping silence, like a massive, unseen shadow slowly enveloping a vibrant light. The creeping silence deepened. What began as a subtle attenuation of tactical updates soon became a full cessation from multiple Phalanx squads. First, Zone Delta, then Kappa, then Phalanx Alpha 1, the spearhead unit designated for the primary continental mass. No distress signals. No emergency beacons. Just nothing. The biomonitors, which had previously displayed the rhythmic, unwavering vitals of the Obsidian Phalanx warriors, flatlined. Not in a sudden surge of energetic death, but in a gradual, unsettling fade, as if the very life force within them had simply evaporated. Strategos Prime K'tharr, a being whose very consciousness was an intricate web of tactical algorithms and strategic calculations, felt a tremor of something alien to his species. Doubt. His primary analytical processors flagged the anomaly. 87% of deployed Phalanx units had ceased all communication within a Terran cycle of insertion. Unprecedented. Even against Class 7 threats, the Phalanx maintained a 99% combat efficacy rating. This was not merely a deviation. It was a statistical impossibility. Reroute all sensor arrays to designated insertion zones. K'tharr intoned, his voice a low thrum through the command deck. Prioritize atmospheric penetration scans. Look for any energy discharge, any structural collapse, any evidence of localized resistance. The vast sensor grids of the Harbinger of Dominion hummed, focusing their immense power on the verdant sphere below. The scans were exhaustive, penetrating dense forest canopies, piercing through mountain ranges, probing the depths of the oceans. The results, however, were confounding. There was no evidence of conflict, no craters from high-yield explosives, no scorch marks from energy weapons, no telltale signatures of battle. The Terran landscape remained pristine, undisturbed, exactly as it had appeared before the deployment. It was as if the Obsidian Phalanx had simply dissolved into the planet itself. No, Strategos, reported a comms officer, their multifaceted eyes cycling through data streams. There is nothing. No return signals from their suits, no residual energy signatures from their weaponry. Even their dropships, still registered on our long-range trackers, show no signs of internal activity. They are inert. Inert. The word hung in the command center, a discordant note in the symphony of K'tharr efficiency. The dropships were designed to be recoverable, to be reused. For them to remain dormant, with no command signal for retrieval, was another violation of established protocol. It suggested that the occupants, the elite warriors of the hegemony, were no longer capable of issuing such a command. K'tharr accessed the last recorded transmissions. From Phalanx Alpha 7, operating in the equatorial forest, the final log entry was chillingly mundane. Perimeter established. Initial biological survey complete. Proceeding to Target 1, geothermal energy nexus. A pause, then the sound of wind, a rustling like leaves, and then silence, just like the others. Not a sudden cutoff, but a slow, almost natural cessation, as if the comm unit had simply run out of power or its operator had simply walked away. There are no distress calls, K'tharr observed, the statement a question to the universe. No indication of struggle. Not even a single spike in their combat metrics. The Phalanx, designed to fight until total cellular collapse, simply stopped. A chilling thought began to coalesce in the Strategos Prime's intricate mind. The Terrans were primitive, pre-FTL. They lacked the technology to cloak a force capable of neutralizing the Phalanx. They lacked the weaponry to destroy them without leaving a trace. Yet, the Phalanx was gone. Not defeated, but erased. The Harbinger initiated a new protocol. A single, unarmed scout drone, cloaked and shielded, was deployed from a secondary launch bay. Its mission, to descend into Zone Alpha 7, where the lead squad had last reported, and gather visual data. This was not a combat operation. It was a reconnaissance mission born of profound confusion. The drone, a needle-thin probe of advanced K'tharr alloys, slipped silently through the atmosphere, its optical sensors scanning the dense, green canopy below. Hours passed. The drone reached its target coordinates. Its high-resolution cameras transmitted pristine images back to the Harbinger. Lush foliage, towering trees, the vibrant, alien yet familiar ecosystem of Terra. And then it found it. The dropship's serpent's tooth. It rested in a small clearing, exactly where it had landed, its ramp still lowered. But it was empty. Utterly, unnervingly empty. No warriors, no equipment, nothing. The drone drifted closer, its sensors sweeping the interior of the dropship. No sign of struggle. No bloodstains, no scorch marks. The internal systems were powered down, but intact. And then, on the interior wall of the dropship, where the Phalanx warriors would have stood just hours before, a crude, almost childlike scratching. Not etched with a tool, but gouged, as if by a claw or a sharpened digit, into the neutron-dense alloy. The drone's optical sensors focused, and the image resolved on the Harbinger's main view screen. A series of rough, angular symbols, unmistakably Terran. The Strategos Prime's processors immediately translated, cross-referencing with the extensive linguistic databases compiled during the initial planetary survey. The message, scrawled in a stark, ancient script, pulsed on the screen, a primal challenge echoing through the void. Send more. A wave of profound, cold dread washed over the command deck. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a victory declaration. It was an invitation. An invitation to oblivion. The K'tharr Hegemony had never encountered anything like this. They had faced armies, fleets, and empires. But they had never faced a planet that simply absorbed its invaders, then calmly asked for more. The silence was no longer creeping. It was absolute and terrifying. The chilling message, send more, seared itself into the K'tharr Hegemony's collective consciousness. It wasn't a boast, nor a desperate plea. It was an invitation, an almost insolent challenge, delivered from a world that, by all metrics, should have been a broken husk by now. Strategos Prime K'tharr's analytical processors cycled through every known combat scenario, every tactical doctrine, every historical precedent. Nothing, absolutely nothing in the vast archives of the hegemony, stretching back across countless conquered star systems, offered a parallel to this anomaly. The Obsidian Phalanx, the apex of K'tharr military might, had not merely been defeated, they had been erased. Without a whisper, without a single, desperate last transmission. The command deck of the Harbinger Dominion was no longer a hub of efficient calculation. A profound, almost spiritual disquiet settled over the K'tharr crew. Their multifaceted eyes, usually focused and unwavering, now darted across the holographic displays, searching for a pattern, a clue, anything that could explain the inexplicable. The silence from Terra was not merely the absence of sound. It was the presence of an immense, terrifying void, a vacuum that had swallowed their finest. Rerun all atmospheric, geological, and biological scans, K'tharr commanded, his voice devoid of its usual rhythmic certainty. Initiate deep spectrum analysis. Search for previously unclassified energy signatures, anomalous material compositions, any indication of an unknown defense mechanism. Expand sensor range to penetrate crustal layers. If there's a hidden infrastructure, a subterranean complex, we will find it. The Harbinger-esque colossal sensor arrays intensified their efforts, bathing Terra in a cascade of exotic energies. Gravimetric pulses, chronoton waves, hyperspectral light, and subquantum resonance scans probed every millimeter of the planet's surface and depths. The results continued to defy logic. The planet remained, geologically and biologically, a Class 3 pre-FTL world. No hidden weapons platforms, no vast, subterranean cities, no cloaked energy grids. The Terrans possessed no technology capable of such a feat. It was as if the planet itself had simply consumed the Phalanx. The implications were staggering. The Hegemony's entire strategic philosophy was built upon quantifiable threats and predictable responses. You faced an army, you deployed a superior army. You faced a fleet, you deployed a superior fleet. But how did one combat a phenomenon? How did one wage war against a world that merely absorbed its invaders? Strategos Prime, a data analyst, reported, "We have isolated a recurring, low-frequency resonance signature across multiple insertion zones. It is extremely subtle, almost imperceptible. It appears to emanate from the indigenous biomass, specifically from large, ancient arboreal formations." K'tharr zoomed in on the data. Trees, ancient, biological structures, not technological, not artificial. The idea was absurd. Yet, the data persisted. The resonance was not a weapon signature, not a communications frequency. It was more like a biological hum, a deep, resonant thrumming that seemed to subtly shift and change, mirroring the Terran diurnal cycle. "Deploy a specialized bioprobe," K'tharr ordered, his mind racing through possibilities, however outlandish. "Designate Arbor Sentinel. Equip it with hypersensitive organic analysis tools, environmental samplers, and cellular replication scanners. Instruct it to focus on the biological anomalies within Zone Alpha 7. No weaponry. Pure observation." The Arbor Sentinel, a delicate, almost insectoid drone, was launched. It was a stark contrast to the brutal efficiency of the Phalanx dropships. Designed for stealth and intricate data acquisition, it navigated the dense Terran atmosphere with silent grace, its multi-spectrum optics drinking in the vibrant, unsettling beauty of the equatorial forest. It found the Serpent's Tooth dropship again, still open, still empty. And the crude, gouged message remained on the wall. "Send more." The Arbor Sentinel then began its slow, methodical sweep of the surrounding forest. It analyzed the soil, the water, the air. It sampled the flora, the fungi, the minute insect life. It registered the same low-frequency resonance, strongest near the colossal, ancient trees that dominated the canopy. Its internal processors struggled to categorize the data. Everything appeared normal, yet profoundly wrong. The forest was alive, teeming with life, but there was an underlying, almost imperceptible intensity to it, a sense of ancient, patient power. Then, the Arbor Sentinel detected something else. Faint, almost ghost-like heat signatures. Dispersed, diffuse, moving. Not the sharp, concentrated signatures of Terran fauna. More like residual warmth. The drone's bioscanners struggled to define it. It was too spread out, too amorphous to be a living creature. Yet it was undeniably there. And it seemed to be pulsating with the same low-frequency resonance as the trees. The data streamed back to the Harbinger, painting a picture that was less a military analysis and more a terrifying ecological report. The forest was vibrant, healthy, and unnervingly quiet. And then, the Arbor Sentinel's primary sensor array flickered. A localized, incredibly faint energy surge. Not destructive, not hostile, more like an absorption. The drone's internal diagnostics reported a minute, almost imperceptible degradation in its own structural integrity. It was as if the very air around it was slowly, gently, dissolving its molecular bonds. Strategos Prime, the comms officer, reported a tremor in their voice. The Arbor Sentinel is reporting molecular instability. It's not being attacked. It's being integrated. The resonance signature is increasing around it. Its power readings are dropping. Not a surge, but a drain. K'tharr watched the live feed from the drone. The vibrant green of the forest seemed to shimmer, almost imperceptibly. The faint, amorphous heat signatures coalesced, then dispersed, then coalesced again, like a slow, deliberate breath. The Arbor Sentinel's image began to pixelate, not from a damaged camera, but from its very atoms beginning to unbind. The last image transmitted was of a towering, ancient tree, its bark gnarled and knotted, its canopy stretching impossibly high. And then silence. Again, another unit, meticulously designed, vanished. Not destroyed, not defeated, simply gone. The Strategos Prime closed his primary optic, a cold, alien sweat beating on his sensory plates. This wasn't war. This was something else entirely. This was a planet that didn't fight. It digested, and it had just sent them a casual invitation for its next meal. The silence from Terra was no longer just terrifying. It was profoundly, existentially unsettling. The loss of the Arbor Sentinel, not to destruction, but to an inexplicable, gradual molecular dissolution, shattered the last vestiges of K'tharr logical certainty. The low-frequency resonance, the amorphous heat signatures, the chilling message, they coalesced into a single, terrifying hypothesis. Terra was not merely defending itself. It was actively, patiently, consuming its invaders. Strategos Prime K'tharr, a being whose existence was predicated on the cold, hard logic of conquest, found his core programming encountering an unresolvable paradox. How did one assimilate a world that assimilated you? The Harbinger of Dominion became a vessel of profound unease. Its vast crew, usually bustling with purpose, moved with a hesitant, almost fearful efficiency. The silence from the planet below was no longer just an absence of communication. It was a hungry, waiting void. Every sensor reading, every spectral analysis, every gravimetric pulse seemed to echo that insidious message: send more. Recalibrate all deep scan arrays for biomass analysis, K'tharr ordered, his voice now tinged with an unfamiliar urgency. Focus on the cellular structure of the dominant arboreal species. Cross-reference with the last known molecular signature of the Arbor Sentinel and the Phalanx warriors. Search for any trace, any vestigial imprint within the Terran ecosystem. The Harbinger's powerful sensors complied, painting the surface of Terra in intricate, unsettling detail. Microscopic analysis of the planet's vast forests revealed a bewildering complexity. The ancient trees, in particular, displayed an astonishing internal energy signature, far exceeding what was typical for their biological composition. It was not a generated energy, but more like a stored potential, a latent power humming just beneath the surface of their organic structure. And within this complex biological web, the sensors began to detect it. Faint, almost ghost-like echoes of K'tharr molecular structures. Not intact, not organized, but dispersed, integrated into the very fabric of the Terran biomass. It was like finding the faint, metallic taste of a dissolved blade in the soil it had once pierced. The Phalanx, the Arbor Sentinel, they hadn't been destroyed. They had been absorbed. Their complex molecular structures broken down. Their unique energy signatures diffused, and their raw material repurposed. The horrifying implication began to settle in. The low-frequency resonance wasn't a defense mechanism. It was a metabolic hum. The amorphous heat signatures weren't a cloaked enemy. They were the planet's own digestive processes. Strategos Prime, a bioanalyst, reported, their multifaceted eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror. The molecular traces, they are not random. They are being systematically integrated. The Terran flora, particularly the ancient trees, are exhibiting accelerated growth rates in the vicinity of the absorption zones. It's as if they are feeding. Feeding. The word resonated with a primal dread. The K'tharr Hegemony had always viewed planets as resources, as territories to be harvested. They were the apex predators of the galaxy. But here, on this small, verdant world, they were the prey. And the hunter was not a species, but an entire ecosystem. K'tharr projected the image of the gouged message from the serpent's tooth onto the main view screen. "Who wrote this?" he demanded, the question echoing in the tense silence. The Phalanx were trained to absolute loyalty, to fight until the last cellular function ceased. They would never abandon their dropship. They would never deface hegemony property. The bioanalyst hesitated. Strategos, the molecular traces indicate the presence of Phalanx genetic material within the Terran arboreal samples. And the quality of the gouges on the dropship's interior, they are consistent with a K'tharr digit. But the lack of precision, the almost primal nature of the marks, it suggests a mind in extreme duress, or one that has been fundamentally altered. A mind fundamentally altered. The thought was a cold, creeping horror. Had the Phalanx warriors, in their final moments, been conscious of their own dissolution? Had they been aware as their very essence was being broken down and consumed? And if so, had one of them, in a final, desperate act of defiance or a horrific, twisted form of adaptation, scrawled that chilling invitation? Or is it something far worse? A message from the assimilator itself, using the last vestiges of its victim's being? The Harbinger remained suspended in high orbit, its mission parameters now utterly meaningless. Conquest was impossible. Assimilation was a death sentence. Retreat, the most logical option, felt like an admission of profound, unprecedented defeat. The K'tharr Hegemony had never retreated. They had never encountered a force they could not understand, could not quantify, could not crush. Below them, Terra slept. The vast, ancient forests hummed with a deep, unsettling resonance. The sun rose, painting the world in warm, inviting light, utterly oblivious to the existential terror gripping the alien vessel above. The silence from the planet was no longer just a mystery. It was the sound of a planet slowly, patiently digesting its invaders. And the message, send more, was not a challenge to fight, but an invitation to feed. The K'tharr had sent their elite warriors to Earth. And Earth, in its vast, silent indifference, had merely opened its maw. The K'tharr Hegemony, forged in the crucible of countless interstellar conflicts, had always possessed a solution. A bigger fleet, a more devastating weapon, a superior tactical doctrine. But here, suspended in the silent void above Terra, the Harbinger of Dominion was a monument to profound, unprecedented impotence. Their enemy was not an army to be crushed, nor a civilization to be subjugated. Their enemy was the planet itself, a vast, complex organism that simply digested. The chilling message, send more, now resonated not as a boast, but as an almost polite request for another meal. Strategos prime K'tharr internal processors, designed for logical progression and decisive action, were caught in an endless loop of unresolvable paradoxes. Every K'tharr weapon in their formidable arsenal, from orbital kinetic bombardments to matter conversion charges, was designed for destruction. But how did one destroy a process? How did one bomb a digestive system without utterly annihilating the very resource they had come to acquire? The irony was bitter, an acrid taste in the Strategos' sensory glands. "We are spectacularly overprepared," K'tharr mused aloud, the words a low thrum that barely registered above the ship's ambient hum, "for a foe that doesn't believe in fighting. A truly unique tactical quandary, wouldn't you say? We brought fire and fury to a garden that merely decided to expand its compost pile. The Harbinger's deep scan arrays, now operating at their absolute theoretical limits, continued to probe the Terran biomass. The data returned was not only terrifying, but conceptually nauseating. The molecular traces of the Phalanx, once distinct and alien, were no longer merely fragmented. They were being actively resequenced. Their unique genetic markers, their advanced cellular structures, Even the subtle psionic signatures inherent to their very being were being disassembled and then meticulously woven into the complex, vibrant tapestry of Terran life. It wasn't just absorption. It was a profound, horrific form of biological integration. The planet was not merely consuming the K'tharr. It was learning from them. It was incorporating their strengths, their very essence, into its own evolving metabolism. The low-frequency resonance, previously dismissed as an anomalous biological hum, was now identified as a planet-wide biocomputational network. The ancient trees, those colossal arboreal formations, were not just passive absorbers. They were the central processors, their root systems forming an immense, subterranean neurological network. The amorphous heat signatures were the slow, deliberate pulses of this planetary consciousness, silently processing the alien invaders, extracting their unique properties, and distributing them throughout the ecosystem. The K'tharr strategists had always prided themselves on their comprehensive understanding of biological warfare. They had developed countermeasures for countless pathogens, genetic modifications, and bioengineered threats. But this was not a weapon. It was an evolutionary imperative. A planet that didn't just survive an invasion, but benefited from it. The Phalanx, the elite of the elite, had not died in glorious combat. They had become fertilizer. A profound, chilling realization spread through the Harbinger's command deck. The send more message was not a challenge, but a grotesque form of gratitude. The Phalanx, with their enhanced strength, their accelerated healing, their innate psionic abilities, all were now being processed, refined, and distributed throughout Terra. What would this planet become after assimilating not just one, but multiple waves of the hegemony's finest? The K'tharr crew, once unflappable, began to show signs of profound psychological distress. Every breath of recirculated air felt tainted. Every distant glimmer of green from the planet below seemed to pulse with an unseen hunger. The fear was no longer of a direct attack, but of a subtle, insidious contagion. What if the absorption mechanism was airborne? What if even proximity to this world was enough to begin the slow, terrifying process of integration? Their advanced shielding, designed to deflect energy blasts and physical projectiles, was utterly useless against a biological process. Strategos Prime, a comms officer, stammered, their normally composed form trembling. Analysis of the atmospheric particulate matter around the dropship insertion zones indicates trace elements of highly complex organic compounds. Not Terran. K'tharr. It's aerosolized. The planet is exhaling them. The K'tharr Hegemony had always understood the concept of a Pyrrhic victory. This was something far worse. This was an ultimate defeat delivered by a silent, green maw, a defeat so complete it erased not just the invaders, but the very concept of their resistance. The Harbinger of Dominion remained in its silent vigil, a solitary sentinel in the black, watching a world that had simply opened its mouth, swallowed the galaxy's most feared warriors whole, and then, with an almost imperceptible planetary sigh, asked for seconds. The Harbinger of Dominion hung like a tombstone in the silent void, its vast, intricate systems thrumming with a newfound, terrifying purpose, not conquest, but comprehension. Strategos Prime K'tharr, a being whose entire existence was defined by logic and domination, found his consciousness fractured, unable to reconcile the unprecedented reality below. The fear that permeated the command deck was no longer a military apprehension. It was a profound, existential dread. The planet Terra was not merely a threat. It was a conceptual horror, a living, breathing paradox that devoured invaders and then, with chilling audacity, asked for more. The air in the Harbinger's command center grew thick with unspoken terror. K'tharr crew, usually models of K'tharr discipline, fidgeted, their multifaceted eyes darting to the main view screen, which now displayed a continuous, horrifying loop of biological data. The accelerated growth of Terran flora, the faint, undeniable shimmer of integrated K'tharr molecular signatures within the planet's biomass, the low, resonant hum that was the planet's silent metabolism. The fear was insidious, not of a weapon that might strike, but of an embrace that might consume. Atmospheric particulate analysis confirms increasing concentrations of aerosolized K'tharr biological compounds. A bioanalyst reported, their voice strained, "The planet is shedding, exhaling what it has processed. Our external hull integrity is nominal, but the particulate count is increasing. We are in a digestive plume, strategos." A digestive plume. The words hung heavy, painting a grotesque picture. They had brought their most elite warriors, and the planet had rendered them into a fine, biological mist, exhaling their essence back into the cosmos. "One must concede," K'tharr rumbled, a strange, dry humor in his tone. "The Terrans have mastered resource recycling to an unparalleled degree. Perhaps we should send a delegation for cross-cultural exchange, provided they don't mind becoming the curriculum." The sarcasm, sharp and cutting, was lost on the terrified crew, but it underscored the profound absurdity of their predicament. The hegemony, were being schooled in planetary-scale digestion. The implications of the resequenced K'tharr DNA within the Terran ecosystem were horrifying. The planet was not just absorbing, it was adapting. It was taking the strengths of the Obsidian Phalanx, their incredible resilience, their psionic potential, their enhanced senses, and weaving them into its own genetic fabric. What would a world that had consumed 1,000 such warriors become? A living superorganism, its flora imbued with alien traits, its very atmosphere humming with absorbed psionic energy. The Send More message was not merely a request for sustenance. It was an invitation to further evolution. K'tharr activated a secure, deep code channel to the hegemony's Grand Strategos Council, light years away. The message was concise, devoid of emotion, yet carried the weight of utter, unprecedented defeat. Designate terra. Threat assessment. Unquantifiable. Absorption rates. Complete. Recommend. Strategic quarantine and reevaluation of all offensive doctrines. Request. Immediate deployment of planet sterilization protocols, if such a measure is deemed strategically viable without risking further contamination. The very idea of sterilizing a Class 3 world, a planet ripe for resource extraction, was anathema to K'tharr doctrine. It was an admission of ultimate failure. But the alternative to allow this evolutionary horror to continue, to risk its insidious process spreading beyond soul, or worse, to send more of their own into its insatiable maw, was unthinkable. This was not a war they could win. This was a biological event horizon. The response from the Grand Strategos Council was swift, cold, and absolute. Strategic quarantine approved. Sterilization protocols denied. The risk of unintended biological contamination to interstellar space is too high. The hegemony does not risk its own integrity for the sake of a single, lost world. Your mission is now observation. Monitor. Record. Under no circumstances are further assets to be deployed. The harbinger of dominion is to remain on station, a sentinel against the unknown. You are to remain until further orders, or until your own systems fail. K'tharr felt a chill deeper than the vacuum of space. They were not being called back. They were being abandoned. The harbinger was to be a permanent witness, a silent, solitary monument to the hegemony's first and perhaps greatest fear. They were to watch as Terra slowly, silently, continued to digest, to grow, to evolve into something utterly alien and profoundly terrifying. The silence returned to the command deck, deeper and more oppressive than before. The distant, verdant sphere of Terra pulsed with its low, resonant hum, a planetary heartbeat. The harbinger of dominion was no longer a vessel of conquest, but a cage, its occupants trapped in an orbital vigil, watching the slow, inexorable growth of a horror they could neither understand nor defeat. And below, the world waited, its silent invitation still echoing in the void. Send more. The harbinger of dominion settled into its new, horrifying purpose. No longer a harbinger of conquest, but a sentinel of profound, cosmic dread. Days bled into weeks, Terran cycles into K'tharr rotations, each passing moment deepening the chilling silence from the verdant world below. Strategos Prime, K'tharr maintained his vigil, a solitary, unblinking eye in the vastness, watching a horror unfold that defied every tenet of his species' understanding. The K'tharr crew, once paragons of unflappable discipline, now moved like automatons, their multifaceted eyes fixed on the planetary displays, a silent testament to the psychological erosion caused by their proximity to the inexplicable. The Harbinger-S sensor arrays, previously tools of dominance, were now instruments of agonizing observation. They meticulously cataloged every minute change on Terra. The low-frequency resonance, the planet's metabolic hum, had subtly shifted, growing in complexity and intensity. It was no longer a simple thrum. It was a symphony of interwoven frequencies, a vast planetary consciousness silently processing, growing, and adapting. The ancient forests, once merely lush and vibrant, now seemed to possess an unnatural, almost predatory vitality. Their growth rates continued to accelerate, their canopies spreading like vast, hungry mouths across continents. The most disturbing observations concern the Terran fauna. In the deeper, more ancient forests, where the initial phalanx insertions had occurred, the indigenous creatures were exhibiting strange, new traits. A large, predatory feline, native to the equatorial regions, was observed to possess an unnaturally heightened musculature and an almost impossible resilience to injury. Its eyes, captured in high-resolution thermal scans, occasionally flared with a faint, psionic resonance, a ghost of the Obsidian Phalanx's innate abilities. A species of arboreal insect, typically docile, now displayed an aggressive, territorial instinct and an astonishing capacity for rapid, directed flight, almost mirroring the agility of a K'tharr scout drone. The assimilation is comprehensive. Strategos, a bioanalyst, reported, their voice flat, devoid of its usual clinical detachment. The molecular resequencing is nearing completion across multiple biological strata. It's not just the flora. The fauna are incorporating phalanx traits. Their enhanced senses, their durability, their psionic potential. It's being distributed, integrated. The planet is not just eating them, it's becoming them. Or rather, it's becoming something more than itself, using them as building blocks. The implication was a cold, hard spike of terror. The send more message was not just an invitation for food, but for genetic material. Terra was evolving, using the K'tharr's elite warriors as catalysts for its own terrifying metamorphosis. What would happen when this planet had absorbed enough? What would a Terran ecosystem, imbued with the strength, resilience, and psionic might of the Obsidian Phalanx, be capable of? The answer was a chilling unknown. K'tharr activated a secure, internal log. Observation log, cycle 78 of Terra containment. The anomaly persists. The subject world, designate Terra, continues its biological assimilation of hegemony assets. Evidence suggests a systematic integration of alien genetic and psionic material into the indigenous ecosystem. The rate of integration is accelerating. The question is no longer if Terra is a threat, but what kind of threat it will become. And more importantly, what will happen when it is satiated? Or, indeed, if it ever can be satiated. The silence from the Grand Strategos Council was absolute. No further orders. No response to K'tharr's periodic, increasingly desperate updates. The Harbinger was marooned, its purpose now merely to bear witness to the birth of a cosmic horror. The ship's internal atmosphere, recycled endlessly, began to feel heavy, almost viscous. Every shadow seemed to lengthen. Every hum of the grav drives seemed to whisper of the relentless absorption below. One of the K'tharr navigation officers, a seasoned veteran of 100 campaigns, was found staring blankly at the main view screen, his multifaceted eyes wide and unblinking. His biomonitors showed erratic neural activity. When approached, he merely pointed a trembling limb at the shimmering green or below. "It's hungry," he rasped, his voice a dry whisper. "It's still hungry. And we're so close." He was quickly sedated, designated for psychological reconditioning. But his words, primal and terrifying, echoed the unspoken fear of every K'tharr aboard the Harbinger. The silence of Terra was no longer merely the absence of sound. It was the profound quiet of a vast, alien digestive system, slowly, patiently, working. The planet below, once a minor blip on the hegemony's strategic charts, had become a living, growing enigma, a monstrous garden that cultivated its own predators. And the Harbinger of Dominion, once the spearhead of an empire, was now merely a fly caught in the web of a truly terrifying and utterly alien form of life. The unending vigil aboard the Harbinger of Dominion became a crucible for the K'tharr crew. The initial shock had given way to a pervasive, bone-deep weariness, a gnawing dread that eroded their formidable discipline. The silence from Terra was no longer merely the absence of communication. It was the oppressive weight of a profound, alien consciousness, patiently digesting its invaders. Strategos Prime K'tharr, though outwardly stoic, felt the subtle tendrils of despair attempting to coil around his own analytical core. He was a commander without a battle, a conqueror without a foe, reduced to a terrified observer of a planet's monstrous metabolism. The Harbinger-S sensor arrays, now running on minimum power to conserve energy for their indefinite assignment, continued their grim work. Every Terran cycle brought new, unsettling data. The low-frequency resonance, the planetary hum, had grown so pervasive that it was now detectable even through the ship's advanced shielding, a faint, almost subliminal vibration that seemed to seep into the very structure of the vessel. It was the sound of a planet breathing, feeding, and growing. The Terran ecosystem, once catalogued as a Class 3 biological anomaly, was undergoing a terrifying transformation. Not a chaotic mutation, but a directed, purposeful evolution. The flora in the former insertion zones, particularly the colossal arboreal formations, now pulsed with a faint, internal luminescence, mirroring the psionic signatures of the assimilated Phalanx warriors. The very air around them shimmered with a subtle energy, a byproduct of the planet's ongoing absorption. The fauna, too, continued their terrifying metamorphosis. Terran predators, now imbued with K'thar's strength and resilience, moved with an unnerving grace, their senses honed to impossible degrees. Herbivores displayed enhanced sensory perception, allowing them to evade these newly formidable hunters with uncanny precision. The entire ecosystem was a self-optimizing engine of biological refinement. Each consumed K'tharr warrior serving as a nutrient packet, a genetic blueprint for further enhancement. Strategos Prime, a bioanalyst reported, their voice thin, "We are detecting anomalous weather patterns over former Phalanx insertion zones. Not natural meteorological phenomena, more like localized atmospheric manipulations. The air currents are behaving in patterns consistent with subtle psionic emanations from the integrated flora. It's as if the ecosystem itself is learning to exert influence." The thought was a cold, alien dread, a planet that could manipulate its own atmosphere, not through geological forces, but through an emergent, biological psionic will. What will be next? Gravitic fluctuations? Direct energy projections? The concept of Terra as a passive, resource-rich world had been shattered. It was a weapon, a living, growing, self-improving weapon, and it had absorbed the very best the hegemony had to offer, not to be defeated, but to be strengthened. The image of the crude, gouged message, "Send more," now shimmered on a small, dedicated display on K'thar's personal console. It no longer seemed like a challenge or an invitation. It felt like a subtle, almost taunting expression of profound satisfaction. The planet wasn't asking for more out of hunger, but out of a desire for further refinement. It was enjoying its meal. Psychological reports from the Harbinger-S medical bay painted a grim picture. Instances of extreme anxiety, paranoid delusions, and full-blown catatonia were on the rise. K'tharr crew members, once proud warriors, whispered of the hungry world and the silent eater. Some claimed to feel a subtle, itching sensation beneath their own carapaces, a phantom sensation of integration, as if the planet's relentless assimilation was reaching out to them even across the void. The medical officers struggled to find a diagnosis, attributing it to prolonged isolation and exposure to extreme, unquantifiable stress. But K'tharr knew. It was the planet. Its silent, terrifying presence was breaking them. Maintain minimum power protocols, K'tharr commanded, his voice a low thrum. Continue observation. Log all anomalous activity. Under no circumstances are any external probes or drones to be deployed. We will not offer it another taste. The order was less about preserving resources and more about self-preservation. They would give Terra nothing more. They would simply watch. The harbinger of dominion remained a solitary, haunted sentinel, a silent testament to the hegemony's profound miscalculation. Below, Terra spun, a vibrant, terrifying jewel in the black. Its ancient forests hummed, its creatures thrived with alien strength, and its atmosphere subtly rippled with an emergent, planetary will. The silence from the planet was now a profound, terrifying calm, the quiet satisfaction of a predator after a successful hunt. The hegemony had sent its elite warriors to Earth. And Earth, in its profound, silent indifference, had merely opened its mouth, swallowed them whole, and then, with an almost imperceptible planetary sigh, continued its terrifying, unstoppable evolution. The harbinger of dominion S-long, agonizing vigil above Terra, had become an exercise in futility, a slow descent into a cosmic madness. The silence from the planet below was no longer merely the absence of sound. It was the profound, deafening quiet of a monstrous, alien intelligence, patiently, relentlessly, devouring and becoming. Strategos Prime K'tharr, a being designed for infinite calculation, now found his logical processes dissolving, replaced by an unsettling, primal dread that resonated with the very core of his being. The K'tharr crew, once the epitome of their hegemony's might, were now spectral figures, their movements sluggish, their multifaceted eyes haunted by the green orb that spun below, a beautiful, terrifying trap. The Harbinger's sensor arrays, now barely maintaining functionality, continued to transmit their grim data. The low-frequency resonance, the planet's metabolic hum, had reached a crescendo, a pervasive thrum that vibrated through the very hull of the battle carrier, a chilling lullaby of assimilation. It was no longer a hum. It was a vast, resonant chord, a planetary symphony of life and absorption. The ancient forest, the vast, green oceans of biomass, pulsed with an internal, vibrant light, their colossal arboreal forms now acting as conduits for immense, unseen energies. The Terran ecosystem had undergone its final, terrifying metamorphosis. Every creature, every plant, every microscopic organism hummed with an unnatural vitality, imbued with the raw, resequenced genetic and psionic essence of the Obsidian Phalanx. Predators moved like blurs, their forms shifting subtly, their eyes glowing with the faint, residual psionic energy of their assimilated K'tharr traits. Even the very air shimmered with a palpable force, a testament to the planet's profound, terrifying evolution. The anomalous weather patterns had intensified, becoming localized atmospheric disturbances, swirling vortexes of energy and organic matter that moved with an unnerving, almost intelligent purpose. They were not storms. They were the planet's new senses, its extended reach. Then, the ultimate, horrifying climax. A single, monumental energy signature pulsed from the planet's surface. Not a destructive blast, not a weapon's discharge. It was a focused, powerful psionic emanation, emanating from the largest, most ancient forest on the equatorial landmass, the very zone where Phalanx Alpha 7 had first inserted. This was not the diffuse, scattered psionic resonance they had previously observed. This was concentrated, directed, and it was aimed directly at the Harbinger of Dominion. The K'tharr Strategos Prime watched, transfixed, as the energy wave washed over his vessel. It did not tear through the shields, did not rip apart the hull. Instead, it seeped in a subtle, invasive current, bypassing all defensive protocols. The lights on the bridge flickered erratically. Consoles flared, then died. The ship's internal systems, designed for millennia of interstellar travel and combat, began to shudder. Not from impact, but from something far more insidious. A profound systemic fatigue. Internal diagnostics failing. A comms officer rasped, their multifaceted eyes wide with a dawning horror. Power conduits degrading. Life support oscillating. It's not an attack, strategos. It's a drain. It's absorbing our energy, our very will. K'tharr felt it too. A profound, almost overwhelming weariness. His own processors, designed to run endlessly, felt heavy, sluggish, as if an invisible weight was pressing down on his very consciousness. He looked at the main view screen. The image of Terra pulsed with a vibrant, almost predatory light. And then he saw it. A new pattern, forming on the surface of the planet itself. Not in the gouged metal of a dropship, but in the vast, swirling vortexes of atmospheric energy subtly shaping themselves over the land masses, writ large for the K'tharr to witness. The planetary consciousness, amplified by the absorbed psionic might of the Obsidian Phalanx, was communicating directly, and the message, formed not in symbols but in the very manipulation of its atmosphere, was the same chilling, terrifying demand that had been scrawled in blood on the dropship wall. Send more. It was not a request. It was an expectation. Terra didn't just win, it had absorbed them. It had taken their might, their knowledge, their very essence, and incorporated it into its own terrifying evolution. The Phalanx, the elite warriors, had not been defeated. They had been the first delicious course. The planet was a living, breathing, consuming entity, a superorganism that saw the K'tharr Hegemony not as an enemy, but as a rich, untapped larder. The harbinger of dominion began its slow, inevitable drift. Its engines sputtered, its lights dimmed, its life support systems struggling. Not destroyed, not shattered, but utterly, completely drained. The K'tharr, trapped within, felt their own vital energies ebbing, their will to resist dissolving. The silence that fell over the harbinger was absolute, a profound quiet that swallowed all fear, all hope, all thought. It was the silence of a vessel slowly, inexorably, being integrated into the cosmic background, its very essence fading into the vast, indifferent maw of the universe. Below them, Terra hummed. A low, satisfied thrum. The sun rose, bathing the vibrant, terrifying world in warm light. The ancient forests pulsed with their absorbed, alien power, and the creatures within them moved with an unnerving, perfected grace. The planet had not only won, it had evolved. And in the profound, eerie silence, it waited. For more.